Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on this beautiful Wednesday. I hope it is lovely wherever you are. So, good morning and good afternoon and good evening. Sounds like a lot of people are joining us from all over the place. So, we've got a great group here. And thank you guys so much for taking the time to join us today. So, just a couple of housekeeping things. We'll start with some general information about Lulu if you are unfamiliar. And I also just want to mention that our good friend Paul at Lulu is going to be in the chat today, trying to answer your questions as they come through. Well, also, oh man, Ellen, you're in Hawaii. We're all jealous of you now. That's great. But thank you for getting up early in the morning to join us. So Paul will be in there trying to answer questions as we go through the webinar. We'll also stop at the end. We'll try to stop 5 or 10 minutes before 1. This will be an hour webinar. So, we'll try to give some time at the end to answer questions as well. And so I'm just going to dive right into it. So today you are joining Team Lulu to hear about 5 things to know before you publish. So this is the first part of a 4-part masterclass we're doing for Self-Publishing 101. So our hope is that if you tune in to each webinar. And so just as a note, all of these will be recorded. And if you've signed up, you will be able to access the recording. We'll also post these on our YouTube channel, so no one will miss out. But our hope is that after you go through these 4 parts, you will know from basically soup to nuts how to get your book published. So, we're available. Our email is webinars@lulu.com if you have any questions with the recording. But you are tuning in for the first installment of this 4-part masterclass. So we're excited that you're here, and I'm going to go ahead and get started with the 5 things to know before you publish. So as I mentioned, we are going to start with a little bit of background. So hopefully you're familiar with Lulu, but if you are not, then welcome. We are located in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. We have less than 100 employees, and we're founded by authorpreneur, debatable if that's a real word or not, Bob Young. So Bob also founded Red Hat Software and decided to found Lulu after he worked at Red Hat and wanted to tell his story of what that was like. No publishers were really interested in taking that on. There were a lot of barriers to entry, and he got wrapped up with a vanity publisher and had to buy like thousands of copies of his book and front the cost and all of that just to get his story out. So he felt like there had to be a better way, and Lulu is what that way was. So we do have a ton of his book in our office. We're still trying to get rid of copies. So through that experience, he decided to make it easier, more accessible, and just create an open source platform where everyone who has a story to tell has the ability to tell it without spending oodles of money and having to basically rent out a storage shed and then start a company to store those books. So anyway, that's a little bit about us. Our mission is Lulu is dedicated to making the world a better place, one book at a time, through sustainable practices, innovative print-on-demand products, and a commitment to excellent service. So it's just a little bit about us there. So I'll move right along here. What's next? We're a B Corp. A little bit more about us. So if you're unfamiliar with B Corps, this is kind of one of my favorite things about Lulu, but we are a B Corp, and that is a for-profit company that's certified by the nonprofit B Lab to meet rigorous standards of social and environmental performance, accountability, and transparency. So if you're not familiar with B Corps, there's a really wonderful community of companies that have kind of taken this pledge and are trying to work to make the world a better place. So definitely look those up and try to spend your dollars there. Let's make this world better. All right, so up next, let's see. I see that we've got our team here, and I just want to make sure really quick that we've got the right copy up here. So my apologies. We've actually got Anna Marie on the team as well, and I'm not seeing her card here. I apologize for that, but we'll go ahead and do some quick introductions. So I'm Chelsea. I am our brand engagement manager.
I'm a marketing associate.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm the social media manager.
And I'm Paul. I'm the copywriter.
You know what, Anna, my apologies. It's completely my fault. I just realized what I did wrong. Anna's great. She has a beautiful face. I'm sorry that you guys won't be able to see it today. Tune in next week. All right, so up first are goals. So we're going to start with goals. I think that's a good place to start, kick this off. So as you start your publishing journey, as you begin to think of how to publish your book or what to publish, you want to be able to set goals for each project that you're working on. So a lot of people might see this in the early stages of writing and think, my goal is to finish this book. And that's an excellent goal. That's obviously a huge part of it. But if you're not looking a little bit farther down the road, then you're doing yourself a huge disservice. So we see so many authors that work so hard to finish their books. And then when they're done, they're kind of asking us, well, now what do I do? And at that point, because they didn't take the time to sort of sit down and create a strategic roadmap and goals, it can be really overwhelming to think about the marketing and networking pieces and all the other things that have to fall into place for your book to be successful. So this is something that I definitely think, I think number one is where this goes. But as we kind of roll out this list, you can customize it to your needs. So as I mentioned, each project should have a measurable goal. And the keyword here is measurable. So if it's not measurable, then how will you know if you achieve it? Outlining your goals in a clear way in the beginning can be your reference as you go through the process and you're trying to make decisions as to, should I go to this event? Should I spend these ad dollars? Should I engage with this group? Well, does it align with your goals? So setting these in the beginning can be a really, really great way to make sure that you stay on track as we move forward. So on this next slide, you can see that I've listed several different goals that we've seen Lulu users come up with, or why they're creating this book, obviously to make money. We see a lot of organizations and nonprofits that want to raise awareness. A lot of nonfiction authors will want to create a book or publish a book to get new clients or draw attention to their business. Seasoned authors may want to call attention to their backlist that could have been traditionally published or independently published. And so publishing a new book is a great way to do that. What we in the industry, they always say, you got to keep writing. People get excited when you publish a book, but then they're like, okay, what's next? So you always want to continue writing, and publishing a new book can be really helpful to sell your backlist. And then again, to share information is the last bullet point there. So this is a short list of what we've seen folks gravitate towards or what they've mentioned are their goals for books. You can pick one or all of these and allow them to work in concert with each other. I mean, you can decide whatever you want your goals to be. This is your book. And a great thing about self-publishing is how customizable it is. It can be catered to exactly what you need in this moment, in this month, in this year. So regardless of what you decide your goals will be, structuring them in the SMART method can be incredibly helpful. So SMART is just a fun little acronym that can help you kind of keep in mind what you need to be looking for when you're setting your goals. So you can go through these. S is specific. So obviously you want to name something and not just like, oh, I'd love to sell some books. You want to put a number to it. You want to tie that together. Is it print books you want to sell? Is it ebooks? Is it audiobooks? So you want to really drill into those details in this first step. So second is measurable. Again, I mean, it's great to have goals, but if you're not putting deadlines and dates and timelines to them, then it can be so easy to sort of let yourself off the hook or they fall to the wayside. So you want to be measurable in your goals. The next one is attainable. So with authors first starting out, you don't want to set a goal that becomes discouraging to you or becomes a detriment to your progress or something you obsess over that is kind of out of reach. So, everybody, on this call or that goes on this journey for publishing a book, you have to be honest with yourself about where you are, who your audience is. Are you writing in a really niche market? So saying, selling 100 books would be really tremendous. Then that's fine. If you wanted to go even scale back even more than that and say, hey, this is my first book. I just want to see if people are interested at all. I want to sell 20 hard copy books. Perfect. It's different for everybody. And this is something that you have to be honest with yourself to really create the best goal structure for you and for your project. So next up is relevant. So on this list, I've got, draw attention to your business or get new clients. So maybe this book is a lead magnet and you're you're giving away an ebook for free so that people sign up for consulting services or learn more about your business. So in a situation like that, selling 100 copies is not going to be as relevant. Maybe you just need to make sure this link got clicked on X amount of times, or that you have, a set number of new calls or new clients or new signups coming through your website. So that's sort of what the relevant piece might look like. And then time-based. So very similar to Measurable, but you want to put a timeline on this. I was at a conference not too long ago. Well, actually, it was a long time ago because we've all been in quarantine. However, when we were still going to conferences, I went to a conference and this guy was talking about publishing his first book and how it took him about 18 months. And he was just so stressed out over that and felt really overwhelmed and ashamed and embarrassed that it took him that long until he did the research to find that that's pretty par for the course. And regardless, we have authors on Lulu that have taken 10 years to write their book. So when you think about time-based things, just make sure that it is catered to you, where you are, and your goals. So whatever your goals are, you need to kind of fill these in so that they will all have some teeth behind them, and you'll be able to really move forward with them and then check back and measure and adjust when necessary or as necessary. All right, so that is the goal piece. So we're going to move on to step 2.
Okay. Hey, everyone. This is Lauren. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about your publishing timeline, or at least one part of the publishing timeline. I know it can be very easy for you to look at your finished book that you've just spent a really long time working on this manuscript, and you're just really excited to immediately just get it out there into the world, share it with everybody, just right away, just jump in and hit publish on that. But there's a lot to actually think about in between that point where you finish writing your book and when you actually hit publish. And there's a lot of opportunities in that time as well that you don't want to waste. So it's important to consider a lot of the different steps in between writing your book and publishing your book. So today I'm going to give you a little bit of a general publishing timeline that focuses specifically on that window of time from when you finish your manuscript to when you actually publish it. And in later webinars in this series, we'll take a look at more fine details of timelines like this. So the timeline that I'm going to give you is modeled after a traditional publishing timeline, but it's also very flexible. And don't forget about that when you're considering all of the different stuff that we give you today. A lot of this stuff is flexible. It's one of the benefits of self-publishing is that you're not locked into the rigidity of the traditional publishing setup. So you can adjust it based on what's going to work best for you. Also remember that for the timelines like this, it's not necessarily going to matter when you do these things. For the most part, there are a couple that need to be done in a specific order, but generally it's much more fluid than a strict timeline. It's more important that you actually do them and how you do them, and not necessarily when you do them. So if we can go ahead and take a look at the next slide, we'll take a look at your publishing timeline. So, first up, write that book. You want to be at least most of the way through your draft before you start thinking about some of the other things in here. You don't necessarily have to have it finished quite yet before you start talking about other things, but you want to be pretty close to the end there. So once you've gotten your book really fleshed out, you're going to want to start to determine who your audience is. That is, incidentally, the next subject for this webinar. So we'll talk more about that in a little bit. You're also going to want to determine your budget and your publishing team, which are also 2 more topics for this webinar. So Anna Marie and Chelsea will talk to you about those things shortly as well. So the next thing you're going to want to do once you have finished your book, and this is one of the areas that is a little bit rigid, that you do have to follow a kind of a specific timeline here. You want to work on your editing, your formatting, and your cover design. And you need to do those things in order. If you have a draft of your book and you start formatting the draft, as soon as you start making changes to that draft, it's going to screw the formatting up and you're going to have to do the formatting all over again. So this is the step that you have to do in order. Once your book is completely finished, the manuscript is done, the draft is ready to go, you're going to send it to an editor if you so choose. We recommend that you do, because it's always nice to have another set of eyes on your book. But once everything is completely finalized and ready to go with the content of your book, then you're going to start your formatting, and then you're going to do your cover design. So once you have that all set and ready to go, you can go ahead and start working on the rest of the timeline there. You're going to start sketching out your marketing plans for your book. I said earlier, and we will get into this in a later webinar, there are a ton of marketing opportunities that come into play before you ever hit publish on your book. And this is the time that you want to start to plan those efforts that you're going to make. You're also going to want to order some proof copies or review copies of your book. You want to make sure that once you have that formatting finalized, once you have the cover all done, everything's ready to go, you want to actually see it before you send it out into the world to other people, for other people to see and read and hopefully love. You want to make sure that it looks perfect. So you're definitely going to want to order some copies. You might want to order some extra copies too, because they can be very useful for your pre-launch marketing efforts. Once you have all that figured out and you're all ready to go with a kind of an idea of what your timeline is going to look like, you're going to want to set an official pub date. Again, that's largely for your marketing purposes, because there's a ton of stuff that you can do between now and that pub date. But you want to make sure that you have set a goal for yourself that is attainable with that pub date. So you want to set your official pub date once you've started checking off some of the other things earlier on this timeline. Once you have your pub date set, you're going to start your pre-launch marketing that you planned a couple of steps ago. And when you've checked off most of the things on your pre-launch marketing plan, that's when you're going to go ahead and publish your book. So there's still plenty more to do after pub day, but this right now is what we're focusing on in that weird timeline right in between when you finish writing your book and you hit publish on our website. All right, so I mentioned earlier that you're also going to want to determine who your audience is. So Chelsea, if we can get the next slide.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you so much for bringing up pre-launch marketing. That's key. If you take nothing else from this, please note that pre-launch marketing is when your marketing should start. And I did see a question about proof copies. So I just to clarify, proof copy is just when you uploaded or published your book, you want to be able to get one copy, or as Lauren mentioned, a handful, just to make sure everything, the formatting is right, there aren't any errors, the cover looks good, everything's aligned appropriately. And so print-on-demand platforms are great for that, because you can just order one and see if it came out exactly as you had imagined and envisioned, and then go from there.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Chelsea. Sorry, I had chat turned off, so I couldn't see you guys. I will fix that. Okay, so let's talk about your audience. Love this picture. Thanks for finding that for us, Chelsea. So, publishing is a weird experience, and writing a book is a weird experience, because the writing part is a very insular, kind of lonely and personal experience. And then all of a sudden you get to a point where you're marketing and publishing it and you're shouting into the void that is the entire internet. And as great as that can be sometimes, as cathartic as it can be sometimes, it's not particularly effective if you're just shouting into the void without any kind of direction or plan in mind, especially if you're trying to market a specific product. And I know that for us creative types, it can sometimes be difficult to think of this book, this project, this labor of love that you've been working on as something as cold and clinical as a product, but it is, and it's important to remember that. Your book is your product, and you are the author and the brand. So you want your product to appeal to a specific audience of consumers. And in order for you to target your book to that audience of consumers, you need to know who they are and where to find them. And I would recommend that you need to know who they are and where to find them before you finalize your publishing plans for your book. So if we can go ahead to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about why you need to know who your audience is. So as I already mentioned, it's very helpful for determining your plans for your marketing and your publishing strategies. It's important to know who you're trying to speak to. It'll help you tailor your marketing efforts so that you're not just shouting into the void, but you're actually putting specific effort into specific places where you're targeting people that are most likely to purchase, read, and pass on your book. But it's also important to know who your audience is, because it'll help you determine your book's genre, especially if you're not already clear on that. I know in some cases it's very obvious from the start what your book's genre is and what BISAC categories will apply to your book when you go ahead and get ready to put it up for sale. But in some cases, you might need to do a little digging to find what genre and therefore what audience is best for you. It's important to know that when you're going into your publishing and marketing plans, though, for a variety of different reasons. For example, if you're thinking about your book's cover design and your cover art, you want your design and your cover art to target your intended audience. You want it to be something that will appeal to the specific readers that will actually be interested in your book. You know, they always say don't judge a book by its cover, but we also know that that's not true. People every day, readers and consumers, are judging books by covers, and that's an unavoidable fact. So the best thing that we can do is lean into it and make sure that our cover design matches and targets the audience that we're going for. It's also going to be very helpful if you know your genre when you're trying to set a competitive retail price for your book. It'll help you inform your profit goals and your budget if you know what your retail price on your book is. And if you know who your audience is and you know what genre your book fits into best, you'll be able to better predict what your audience is used to paying for other books in that genre, which will then help you decide what they'll hopefully be willing to pay for your book and for your content. So if you can go ahead to the next slide, Chelsea, let's talk a little bit about how to find that audience. And it's going to be, I can't give you specifics on how to find your audience because it's going to vary so dramatically depending on what your genre or subject matter is. But on the bright side, you probably already know better than I do where to start looking for your audience, because if you're writing a book about this particular subject, chances are you're already a part of that audience yourself and you already have some familiarity with them yourself. So think first, where do you go to stay in the loop? If you're writing fiction, where do you get your book recs or learn about new news in the genre or anything going on in the genre? If you're writing nonfiction, where do you go for your research? Where do you go to learn more about the subject in question? Where do you get your news from? Things like that. Those are all great places to start. Another great place to find your audience is to find other authors in your field. I always recommend that authors put together what I call a comp list. That is a list of comparable authors that are writing in the same genre or field as you are. This is a super helpful marketing tool to have in general, but it's also great specifically for helping you find your audience. I would also encourage you, if you're going to do this, to put together a tiered list of comp authors. As great as it would be to put together a list of 10 New York Times best-selling authors that are the best of the best in your genre, that's not going to be helpful because you're not going to get the full experience of what kind of marketing and what kind of audience engagement they're experiencing, because they're kind of the outliers. So I would instead recommend that you find a couple of New York Times bestsellers that are like the big popular books in your genre. Find a couple of moderately successful indie authors that are maybe slightly more traditionally published and have some paid promo and stuff behind them, but are still not household names in the same way that some New York Times bestsellers are. And then a couple of fellow self-published authors that are writing in your genre that you've seen them do really great marketing efforts, or they're writing similar books to you and you're hoping to learn from them and emulate their strategies. So go ahead, follow those authors, follow any of the relevant hashtags that they use a lot, or if they share any blogs or media outlets, keep in mind who they're talking about and follow those, get involved with them. Then you're also going to want to look at their readers. You're going to want to look at their followers and their audiences and who is engaging with them, because that's a great place for you to find your audience. If somebody is writing a book in the same genre as you and they have people engaging with them on Twitter or on Instagram or on a newsletter, those people might also be interested in your content, and that's where you start your targeting there. So make sure you check out where these authors are having success with their audience, because that's going to inform where you have success with yours. Last but not least, make sure that you remember that while your book is your product, you are the brand. And there are people that you are engaging with on a regular basis that are interested in you. Even if they're not super interested in your product, that's okay. They're interested in you. And you might be surprised by them being interested in your product too. Make sure you don't rule out your personal audience by reaching out to the communities that you're a member of, and clubs and organizations related to your book subject, but also unrelated to your book subject. And don't forget about your family and friends too. There are plenty of people that are going to want to support you here. Don't rule them out as a possible audience. So knowing your audience will help you determine what your marketing and publishing efforts will look like, but there's more involved in preparing your book for publication than just knowing your readers. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this over. Chelsea, did you have anything to add in there?
You're doing great.
All right. Sorry?
I said awesome job.
Thanks. All right. Then I will go ahead and pass this mic over to Anna Marie to talk more about how and why you should determine your budget before you publish your book.
Hi, as Lauren said, my name is Anna Marie, and today I will be discussing 5 things that will help you set your budget. Setting a budget might not be the most exciting part about self-publishing, but it is important. I'm sure some of you are thinking, why do I need to set a budget? Well, first, you don't have to set a budget. You're more than welcome to publish your book for $0 on Lulu.com. You can upload your manuscript, proceed through the steps, and within a short amount of time, your book can be published and available to the world. But if you're looking to turn a profit with your book, setting a budget is key. It sets out a plan for where your money will go, letting you think about more important things like writing or binge watching your favorite show. But crucially for an author, it lets you set yourself up for success with your next book launch. Chelsea, if you could just put that slide to the next slide. Thank you. The first thing that is on the list is setting a specific goal. A great way to create your budget is to be really specific about your goals and what you want to achieve. So for example, if your goal is to sell 500 copies in 1 year, and let's say you make a profit of $6 per copy, that's about $3,000. So if you spent $1,500 on formatting, editing, and cover design, then that's a $1,500 profit. And that's really not too bad. Putting it into concrete numbers like this will help you achieve your goals and stay on budget. Common categories that self-publishers invest in. Every author's experience is different, but nearly all books should have a few elements in common on their budget. The most common things that authors invest in when creating their book are cover design, editing, formatting, and proofreading. To get an idea of how much these services cost, you can go to the Editorial Freelancers Association website. To get a better understanding of this, here is one example of what it could potentially cost. For a 200-page book, copy editing can run up to $600. Formatting on the website says $900, but we know that formatting can be as low as $200. Here at Lulu, $900 does seem pretty steep, so we encourage you to shop around. But I'll get to that later. But let's split the difference and say that formatting can cost you $500. Additionally, cover design can be in between $200 to $500, and proofreading is about $460. So the total for a 200-page book will be $1,700. But if you know your strengths and weaknesses, that number can be different and it could change. That leads me into my next tip, which is understanding your strengths and weaknesses. Let's say, for example, that I know I went to school for graphic design, but my grammar and spelling are definitely not the best. I'm interested in publishing a book, but I know I have a certain budget that I need to follow. Because of that, I don't need to pay somebody for cover design and formatting, but I know I should definitely set money aside for editing and proofreading. Once you understand your strengths and weaknesses, what you can and cannot do, it will make creating a budget easier, and plus side, you can definitely save a little money. But if you feel like you want to use all the common services that authors invest in, you can do that too. At the end of the day, it really is up to you guys. Research and shop around. Now that I've given you some examples of what it could cost to invest in yourself and in your book, the next step is to shop around. Make sure the company or freelancer you are choosing is right for you. On Lulu.com, we have a partners page that gives authors a variety of options to choose from. If you go on our website and click the resource section at the top, and then click Hire a Pro, you will be on our partners page. We have companies that offer full service on that page, or we have companies that just offer cover design or just editing. If you go to that page, you can see all the companies we have partnered up with to make the publishing experience easier for you. You are not limited to that partners page by any means, but it's a good way to get started. So do your research and make sure that the company or freelancer you are choosing is in your budget and right for you. My last tip for you all is a short one, and that's to put your budget and your plan into a spreadsheet. Creating a spreadsheet helps you see where your money is going. It helps you figure out how to save money when the numbers aren't adding up. And it also lets you see when you start to make money. And I know I like to see when I'm making a profit, so I'm sure you guys do as well. One example that I can show that a spreadsheet is helpful is if I create my sheet and list out the categories I need to invest in. After I put all those numbers into my spreadsheet, I notice that I have a little extra money that I can still use. Since I now have extra money, I would probably invest more in one category that I know I will definitely need help on. Without that spreadsheet, I might not have caught that. Putting everything into a spreadsheet keeps you organized, and you'll be able to visualize your budget and what you need to do next to make sure your book launch is successful. Each of these sections are crucial to setting your budget. If you follow one of these tips without the other, you may miss something when creating your budget. You also want to make sure that you're spending your money wisely and that you know where your money is going and when you start to receive money back on your book. If you follow these 5 things that I discussed, it will be easy for you when you start to create your own budget and begin the self-publishing process. So I hope these tips are helpful to you all. Does anyone else have anything to add? Chelsea, Lauren?
I don't. Thank you so much for doing that. Even though, budgeting may not be the part that we're all very excited about, that as Anna Marie mentioned, it is crucial, as I think all these steps are. I mean, everything that we're going over today is really kind of setting the foundation or laying the groundwork for you to have a really successfully self-published or independently published book. So thank you so much, Anna. And what a perfect picture, just classic piggy bank.
I know, I love that picture. I just had to put it in.
It's great. Awesome. Thank you very much, Anna Marie. So that brings us to step 5, which are the elements of your publishing team. So I think it's kind of funny. When I first started working in self-publishing, when I first started at Lulu, I kind of had the mentality that you go it alone. And self-publishing was like one man or woman band, and you just kind of do everything yourself. And you can, technically you can do that. And we do see people that will go that route and, with varying levels of success. We have authors that come to Lulu and are graphic designers and are making comic books or some art books or things like that. And they're really able to really do everything themselves and maintain complete control. And they have a really beautiful product at the end. And other folks, I think, just maybe for lack of understanding, or maybe you kind of get into it and like Anna was talking about budget, maybe you run out of budget and then you just have to kind of go it alone unintentionally. And then the end product really reflects that. So I think, at this point now, I've seen so many books come through Lulu and in the publishing industry in general. And when you have that team of experts that you can work with and rely on them to help you put all the pieces together, that's really going to help you have the most successful published book. And that doesn't mean, that you have to go to a hybrid publisher or a traditional publisher to get that sorted out. The beautiful thing about the world that we live in today is that there are so many platforms that have either can connect you to resources to help you put together your publishing team, or you can do it piecemeal and put together the exact team that's going to work the best for you. And so I think it's really a nice environment that we have today for independent authors and people who want to try and go, a route that's outside of traditional publishing that probably or may be more advantageous for them. So this next section, this last section of our talk today is really going to focus on this publishing team, how the questions you should be asking yourself as you are deciding who should be on it and the elements of it. And then we'll kind of get into some things I think are essential, and depending on your budget and where you are the ones that I would say you definitely want to have or look into. And all these people are super eager to work with you. Look at this really nice picture. Okay, so how to build your publishing team. So when you think about your project and if you're just starting out, or maybe you have your manuscript done, the first step is to evaluate where you are with your project. So where is your manuscript? Are you over the editing portion, but you just need help with layout? Or maybe you are finishing it up and you just need help from top to bottom. Or maybe you're pretty much done with everything else and you just need a cover designer to pull it all together. no matter where you are, it's really important to just be honest with yourself and figure out what you need to get the book completed. And, don't let your pride play a role in this. If you think you're the best in, word art or paint and you're going to make the best cover ever, look in your genre. I mean, see what other people are doing and help this information dictate what you need for your book and the elements you're going to put together for this team. So first up, evaluate your project and be honest with where you are. So the second step would be, after you identify your needs, think of the ideal candidate that you'd like to work with. So, most of the people that we see that publish books, it's a labor of love. It's, this is your baby. You're making this, putting so many hours into crafting the right words and phrases and making sure the story flows and putting this together. So, you don't want to phone it in and just sort of go to the first person you find on Google to help put these elements together for you. So I would encourage everyone to, once you figure out, okay, here's the list of things I need, really think about who the ideal candidate is for each of those services. So is there an artist whose style you really like and you want to find someone that can mirror that or do the same thing aesthetically? Is there an editor that you've heard great things about and that's really specific to your genre that you want to work with? Even things like, how do I want this information to be delivered to me? Do you want everything to be email based? Do you want to work with folks who will be happy to jump on a Zoom call if you want to talk out, any of their notes? Do you want someone who's going to give it to you straight and be really direct about their feedback? Or, maybe you want someone who has, more bedside manner so that they can kind of delicately relay this information or these critiques to you so that, you won't get too offended and you can kind of start to use them and implement their suggestions into your work. And, no shame in either. I think I would probably be the latter because I don't like it when people are mean. So these are just other things that you want to be thinking about as you're building this team, and get really specific about who this person is, how they will communicate with you, the rapport that you'll have with them. And all of this is going to make it easier to go out and find that person. So that leads me into the next one, which is going to be, do your research. So now that you've decided who you're looking for, go out there and find them. And don't be afraid to ask for samples and specifics. So once you have done some research, you found the candidates, you found the people you want to work with, reach out and ask them. This is an interview. And so you want to make sure you know what questions you're asking ahead of time. So just because you're on a phone call with someone or you have a meeting with someone doesn't mean that has to be the person you choose to be your editor or your cover designer, or even help you with the marketing part of it. Once you meet them, you want to be prepared with good questions to ask so you can really get to the meat of what you need and knowing what's going to be good for your project. So again, kind of with idealizing about who the perfect person is to work with, also think about the perfect answers for these questions. So I would recommend that as you kind of go into your first meeting or your first kind of conversations, have these list of questions with your ideal answers as well, so that as people come to you and start responding to these questions, you'll be able to really narrow it down and find exactly who is right for you, based on these things you've already thought about. So you're not taking a shot in the dark, you know exactly what you're looking for, and you'll be able to find it this way or narrow it down. So as I said, think about it like an interview when you're kind of going into these initial conversations. So a couple questions that you might want to ask ahead of time would be, have you worked on projects like this before? Or are you familiar with this genre? You might want to say, how many projects have you worked on? So for, one great thing about the publishing landscape is that there can be, there's a myriad of service providers out there, and they range from, bestsellers and people who work with mass market publications to people who really know science fiction or something even more niche, maybe science fiction that deals specifically with cats that are developing their own planet. So that person who knows a lot about interdimensional stuff and space travel and all these things, there is probably someone out there who is really familiar with your genre and your niche, and that's who you want to pull in to help you. So have you worked on projects like this before? Are you familiar with this genre? The next one I would say is, what timeline can I expect if we work together? I mean, obviously at this point, I think you should be able to see that the timing of things, as well as your budget and your goals, that is so key to really getting something off the ground successfully. So you need to make sure that whoever you're working with can come along and support that mission that you have and that vision, and timeline is going to be a huge part of it. I mean, if there, some people that we've worked with or some other partners I've reached out to about cover design, and they're like, I'm on a 12 12-week, 12-month wait. So if you sign up with me today, I'm not even going to be able to have exploratory conversation with you until we're 6 months down the road. So these are things you need to be considering and thinking of and asking when you have these first conversations. Next, I would say, what does this service cost? How much does this service cost? So, Anna Marie did a great job talking about budget and what you need to consider there. So, of course, this piece is going to fall in line and help you dictate and figure out who is the right person to work with me, who can, work on my timeline and give me the value that I need for the budget that I have. So as we mentioned before, EFA.org is a great place to reference for pricing. That's the Editorial Freelance Association. So it's a really great way to find out what's the going rate, what people are asking, and get a good range for what you can expect. Of course, there are places like Fiverr or 99 Designs or things like that that may have a wider range. But then the great thing about those platforms is you can usually see samples of work and get in touch pretty quickly to kind of go over the rest of these questions that I've mentioned. So I'll run through these one more time. So have you worked on projects like this before? Or are you familiar with this genre? What timeline can I expect if we work together? How much does this service cost? And the last one here is EFA is a great reference so that going into it, you will know exactly what's appropriate for the services you're requesting, and you won't just kind of have to be blindsided by some random figure that gets thrown at you. All right, so after you put this team together, don't, just set it and forget it. So I'll kind of combine 4 and 5 here. But once you've decided, hey, you guys are the ones, I want you on this team, this is great, communicate your expectations, your timeline, your budget, and any other pertinent info. So if you have a color palette that you really want to use on your cover, or if there's a deadline you need to reach for certain things, and there should be, as we've mentioned, make sure that you're communicating frequently with this team so that they know that everything is on time and everything will be delivered appropriately, and that you're checking in regularly to know that as things develop, you're getting what you need and what you paid for. So the last one is, once you built this team and you've communicated your expectations, don't just set it and forget it. So I would recommend setting up weekly or bi-weekly meetings, depending on the project and the scope, with each of the services or service providers you're working with to say, hey, are you still on track? Collecting feedback from them, having conversations about their suggestions, and if you think they're the right ones, and maybe even pushing back and saying, why do you think this? Or having that dialogue open regularly so that if anything comes up, you can nip it in the bud early and make changes as needed. So it's really important to just think, even though you're paying these people to do a piece of the work for you, this is your book is your business. This is essentially, you're managing these people. So you need to make sure that you're in constant communication with them, maybe not to the extent of micromanaging, but again, when you're having these conversations with them, say, hey, how open are you to having a weekly call with me? Would you rather do a weekly email check-in? So all these things should be set up before you kind of sign on the dotted line and say, hey, yes, this is my team. You guys are going to help me see this book through to completion. It's just a couple of things there. And obviously, Ron Burgundy agrees. So that's great. All right. So I'm going to move on to the elements of your publishing team. All right, so I would obviously recommend everyone get 4 dogs immediately, and that's the start of your publishing team. So building your publishing team, I broke this up into basics and advanced, but I just want to reiterate. I think we've said this a couple times today, but all of this is so flexible and so fluid based on what you're doing, your goals, your budget, and your timeline for the book. But it's important to kind of just know the things that, again, this is my preference or my suggestion for you. And I'll kind of talk about why I think all of these are important. So if you are in a situation where you don't have a lot of money to spend on the book, you're sort of maybe bootstrapping it, and you have a shortened timeline and not a ton of resources to get it done, the basics that I would suggest would be an editor. I would go for a copy editor, a cover designer, absolutely cover designer, marketing, and reviews. So the way that I put this together is because, at Lulu, we've published over 1 million books. So we've really seen, a full spectrum of when books are published really well and done right, and when things seem rushed or, the focus isn't on polishing it and putting it together. So I think at one point it was, traditional publishing versus self-publishing, but now I think it's professional publishing versus unprofessional publishing. And you can do that anywhere. I mean, you can go to a traditional publisher and have things done in a sloppy way. You can do that yourself. So these are my recommendations to make sure you end up on that professional publishing side when you are done with your book. So for the basics, an editor, obviously, this is a huge one. We see people who think they can skip on this, or you want to edit it yourself, or, your mom was a teacher, so she's going to nail it. Maybe she will. And there are definitely success stories of that happening. Your mom's great. But I would highly recommend you contacting or connecting with someone who can offer editing. So copy editing at the very least, so they can go through and make sure that your sentence structure is right, the grammar's right, there's nothing egregious going on, and can really kind of get you out the door with a tightened up manuscript that's nice and polished and grammatically correct at the very least. Then the next one is cover design. So, regardless if you spent all the money in the world on editors and formatting and making the interior look great, if the cover is not there, it's not going to matter. And we see this so often with people who will work so hard on the interior of the book, but then get to the cover and then just kind of phone it in, or, think they can do it themselves, or use some stock photos and then throw it up there. And the majority of people looking, especially, with the connected internet world that we live in today, think of thumbnail. And if your story or themes or the genre you're trying to get across doesn't translate in that thumbnail, people aren't going to click to read the blurb about it. So that's something that I cannot emphasize enough, how important it is to work with a talented cover designer to get something that's really going to stand out and amplify the message of your book. I mean, hook people in, like Lauren said, they're judging you. They're judging the book by the cover. So just make sure that it'll be judged well. So next up, I put marketing on here. I wasn't going to originally, but then I thought, marketing could be putting up a post on Facebook, or putting out a tweet, or, a TikTok, whatever that is, putting out a message on Facebook doesn't cost anything. And that just shares with people, hey, I put this book out, go check it out, leave me a review, things like that. So marketing can be achievable on a smaller scale on a very shoestring budget. And so I would encourage everybody to think, even if you wanted to do paid ads on social media, those can be relatively affordable depending on what you're doing and who you're trying to reach. So I put marketing in here because obviously, if you publish a book and don't tell anybody about it, you're going to have a really hard time selling that book or help finding your readers. So that's why marketing's in there. And then reviews. So reviews can be paid or free depending on, what you've done to build your audience and connect with it. So kind of referencing what Lauren was talking about. But it's always great to have people who are willing to review the book and vouch for it, and, who read it and enjoyed it. So getting your book out to people in your target demographic who can say, hey, I love thrillers and this one was so suspenseful, it was amazing, 5 stars. So you want to try to get a couple of those, especially in the early days, to help with your SEO, help people find the book. And then once they found it and they're like, oh, I still don't know, having these qualified reviews from someone other than yourself is really helpful to help them kind of get over that hump of, yes, I'll buy this book. All right, so for advanced, so for developmental editing is editing that takes a closer look at the structures working within your text. So your themes, your diction, your tone. For fiction, if you're working in mythology or different universes and genres, things like that, developmental editor is going to help you with that. I touched on copy editing a bit earlier, but this is just a service you need to perfect your text, strengthen your prose, and ensure consistency of style throughout. So if you have the budget to do both, I think that's great. But again, as I mentioned, I think copy editor would be the one if you need to choose either or. So the next one will be beta readers. So beta readers, if you're unfamiliar, are people in your key demographics, that's key, or audience that are willing to read and critique your manuscript. So again, going back to the thriller example, if you're writing a thriller, you want people who love that genre to be your beta readers. You don't want a bunch of people who really love nonfiction books about toothbrushing to be reading this book and reviewing it. You need people in your audience to be reading it and then giving you qualified feedback so you can, make sure that you're, meeting the expectations of the readers within your genre and making them happy. And so formatting and layout is another one. So this is just what the inside of your book looks like. This can be done on your own. We have some great resources on how to format your book. But if you can take this off your plate and focus on something else by paying someone to work on this, then that would be my recommendation as well. Cover design, as I mentioned, hugely important. Marketing is on here again, and that can scale as your budget, grows, or as you have more resources to dedicate to it. You can get more involved with your marketing efforts, of course. And another thing to mention is an email list can be a very affordable way to get in front of your audience and let them know of your upcoming books, and just keep them up to date with what you have going on, any promos, things like that. A launch team. So a launch team and reviewers could go hand in hand. This could be the same group of people. But when I say launch team, these are just people who are, when your book launches, people who are willing to buy, share, and review your book as soon as it comes out. So this could be a group of, again, depending on your audience and how much groundwork you've done ahead of the launch, a group of 10, 15 people up to hundreds of people. A quick little pro tip might be to create a Facebook group or maybe even an email thread where everyone from your launch team is on it to effectively communicate your deadlines and expectations. So, hey, the book is launching Friday. I need all of you to go out and buy it and leave a review. Or can you share this on your social media channels, or, whatever your agreement is with this group of people and what they're willing to do. You just want to make sure you have a way to communicate with them quickly, give them updates, maybe best practices, and just make sure that everybody's on the same page so you can amplify your message in the best way possible at your launch date. And reviews, again, I kind of talked about why that's important, but hopefully these people in your launch team will be willing to not only buy the book and champion it, but also leave reviews as well. All right, so I've got one more thing that I just wanted to speak on for cover design. So this, on this slide, I have two different sets of books. So you'll see on the right side, these came from a newsletter called the Book Life Report. That's a great publication for independent authors and self-published books. So if you're interested, I would recommend you signing up. It's from Publishers Weekly. On the right side, this is just a random snapshot from a local bookstore that we have down the road here, called The Regulator in Durham. And it's just kind of their top selling books right now. So I wanted to put this slide together to bring it to your attention because I get this newsletter, Book Life, on the left side every week, I think. It comes out every week. And they always have a section of newly published books. This was the most recent one, and I really just wanted to amplify or exemplify what it looks like when you have, books that are done professionally versus books that are done, maybe not professionally. They're not all terrible, but you can see some stock photos here. You can see the circumcision scar thing. That's probably inappropriate to even put on this slide. I'm sorry. So, but not a great cover. Not interested in it. You can see the broken mirrors, burning bushes. That one's a little bit hard to read, kind of convoluted. So, you can kind of see that all these, they're just not that polished, really put together, really intentional book cover that is going to help you market and sell your book. So if you look at the right side, and of course, this is all preference, but you have to ask your users and your audience what they want to see, and look at some bestseller lists and see what's really successful and what's connecting and resonating with readers. So if you move on to the right side, you can see all of these, some of them are very busy, and that's okay, because the important part is that it's intentional. So all of this is put together to make you feel something or draw your eye to a certain part, or, highlight the important parts of the book, or make it look more interesting visually and aesthetically. So I hope this is a good example of, the 6 that are on the right are, best-selling books. They're very popular right now. They're, mass-produced books for the most part. And then the set on the left, I think this is a kind of just a good way to see side by side what you're up against. So I would definitely recommend, as you get to the cover design part, go to your genre and look at other books that are selling really well. Go to the best sellers and see what they're about, see what they look like, see what's really, resonating with you and really captivating, and see if you can mirror that and do something similar. Another note here is genre expectations will help you kind of guide you through this process as well an experienced, talented cover designer. So I'll get off my soapbox now on on cover design. And move on to the next slide, which is building your publishing team. So just a last note on this, and Anna Marie mentioned it as well, but if you go to lulu.com/partners, she also mentioned how to get to it through the navigation bars on our website. So there's a couple different ways to get to it. If you want to go directly, lulu.com/partners, where we have a list of people who can help you with all the things I just mentioned. So we've got full service, writing tools, editing, cover design, reviews, community, and educational resources. So I would highly recommend you take a look at that page and check those providers out if you are in need of any of the services that I had mentioned. All right. And then last but not least, I'm going to invite the one and only Paul Hobday up here to give you a little bonus information.
Hey, everybody. Hopefully that was a good and informative webinar. Thank you, ladies, for teaching us some fun stuff. So since this is the first part of our masterclass, we're going to keep it going into next week with some more information, and we're going to start looking at how you choose your publisher. So we got past a lot of really important, heavy information about, getting your book prepared, getting your marketing plan in place, budgeting, putting your team together. That's all super important. And one of those steps in, the publishing planning phase is deciding exactly who you're going to publish with. Are you going to use Lulu, obviously, because we're the best, or are you going to go use one of those other guys? Probably shouldn't, but anyway, there are actually scenarios where you should. There's a right publisher for you based on the book you're using or the book you're creating and the services you need. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at some of the things like, does the publisher meet your revenue goals? Are you going to make the money you need to make on your book when you sell it with that publisher? Are there hidden fees or upfront costs? Is it a big free thing on the banner of their website, but once you start talking to someone and they're going to charge you to bind your book and to print each one with a fee when you have to revise and things like that? Does the publisher have tools that align with your marketing plan? And that's a really important one that I think gets overlooked. How do you plan to sell the book? Are you selling it through a retail site? Are you selling it through your own site? Is it your own site like a blog, or is it a website, or is it social media? Thinking about how you're going to sell the book is really important. And then making sure that your publisher is going to align with that so that, you get to sell the book you want to sell. Order minimums, that's a crazy one. A lot of times people will say, or you'll see these services out there that say, just $50 to publish your book, and it doesn't talk anything about how many books you have to order at a minimum to fill the contract. And there are just all of these little granular ins and outs that come into play when you're thinking about what publisher you want to pick. So we're going to really break it down. We'll get some good information in there next week for you to really talk about, how to make sure you're picking the right publisher. We want to make sure that when you decide to publish your book, you're doing it with the right platform, even if that's not us. We don't want you to use Lulu and find that we aren't able to fulfill your needs. It's very important to make sure that you know what you're after. And so, yeah, definitely when we send out our follow-up emails, which should come out either later today or maybe tomorrow, we got to just put the recording together and everything like that. We'll put a link in there to get signed up for next week's. And then we will also send out some emails to our subscribers again, just to make sure everyone has an opportunity to follow us on that for next week's webinar.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. And 5 right there is questions. So it's a perfect segue into our questions slide. So really quick, if you guys aren't checking us out on social media, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube, we're at lulu.com. So definitely come check us out there. As Paul mentioned, we will be sending out the recording of this webinar to everyone who registered. So if you had to leave early or you joined us late, we will be sending out the full recording. And then we will, as I mentioned, this is the first part of our month-long or 4-part series on Self-Publishing 101. So we will also have that link available. We'll start sharing that and sending that out as well. I think by tomorrow, maybe later in the week, but you'll have that in your inboxes soon too. So we do have a few minutes for questions. And Paul, I'm not sure
I wrote down a couple that I didn't really feel good about trying to type out an answer to because they went a little maybe long and detailed. So if we got a minute, I'm going to just touch on two points that people brought up that I didn't feel like I had room to get to in the chat. The first one was BISAC and categories. And I really strongly encourage you not to just listen to me and my 30-second answer here, but go research these things. But BISAC is a very important way for you to categorize your book in a universal manner. Every book that's published by a traditional publisher and every book that's published by a self-publisher that gives a damn about publishing is using BISAC to categorize your books. Anything you published on Lulu prior was using a BISAC category, even though we renamed them and kind of called them our own categories. Those were still tied to BISAC categories. And what BISAC does is it gives you multiple layers of categorization, so you can start very general and get more specific and more specific. And then that will give you the ability to really narrow down exactly what you are talking about in your book and make sure that it's easy to find, because what Bisect does is it works well with search engines so that you can be searchable by other readers, by retailers, things like that. So it's really important. We give you some information on it when you're publishing, and it's not terribly hard to go back in and revise them if you realize you didn't set it quite right or something, but definitely do some homework on those. The second question I saw a fair amount in there was about formatting and technical design. That's another one that you really want to get into some details. We've got some great resources pages. If you go to our website, lulu.com, there's a tab in the header that says resources. Click on that. There are just pages and pages. I have literally spent the last 3 years just putting together resources for y'all. So, and Chelsea and Lauren, Anna as well. We've all been, that's one of the main things we do here is put these resources together for you. They're literally all free. Go grab some stuff, guides, blog posts, videos. If there's something you don't see and you can't find, contact us. Call us on social media, send in a support request and say, hey, I need to learn how to do this. We'll put it on our list and make you a guide. So yeah, just really getting into the technical formatting is too much to do in one webinar. We've done webinars about it and they didn't even feel complete. So really just go grab our guide. We just put out a new book creation guide that's very in-depth about making a file for Lulu specifically. So read up on that stuff. And then of course, if you have any questions or something isn't working, contact our support team. But those were our main 2 questions that I saw that I didn't feel like I had time to answer in there. So yeah, I think that's all we got.
Awesome. Hey, Paul, thank you very much. And just for what's the best way to get to the guide? So our website is lulu.com for those of you who are unfamiliar. And then is it under resources? I guess I could pull it up. I have a computer.
Yeah. So if you go to lulu.com/resources, and that's resources plural, that's our main resources page. And then you're going to see the sub pages for a ton of different resource stuff. Our publishing toolkit is going to have the guides. The author toolkit is going to direct you to writing and publishing software that we like, InDesign, Word, stuff like that. And then if you're looking for some more information about how do I use Word to make my PDF, I would say head over to our YouTube channel or our blog, and that's where we go into more detail about those things.
Awesome. Well, that will bring us right to the end of this little show that we put on for you guys. So yeah, as Paul mentioned, the blog is a great resource. The YouTube channel, Lulu University, is helpful as well. And if you have any other questions, or as I mentioned, are having any issues with the emails or the replay links that we'll send out, please contact us at webinars@lulu.com. And I hope that you guys have a great day, have a great week, and hopefully we'll see you same bat time and same bat place next week. Bye, everyone.
Take care, everyone.